Catherine Stanislawski with Keller Williams, and I'm here today with Paul Long.
I'm Paul Long. I'm Deputy Assessor for Phelps County. I'm representing our office today. The assessor is Tim King. He could not be here today.
Okay, so tell me about your role at the assessor's office. What's the primary role for the assessors?
So the assessor and his staff are responsible for following state statute relating to the assessment of all real and personal property in the county, and that's Chapter 137 in state statute for Missouri, and it outlines the manner in which which assessments should be conducted. The assessor and deputy assessor take an oath to follow these laws of Missouri and be fair and honest with the disposition of these assessments.
Mm-hmm. And the assessment for personal property. Is that what you said?
Yes, yeah. Real estate and personal property both.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's separate from the Phelps County tax collector.
Yes, this is part of separation of government. So the assessor does all the assessments of property. They assign values to which the tax base is then applied. Mm-hmm. The collector collects the money, so there can't be any mixing of duties with that. They are kept separate for a reason.
Yeah. And you're assessing property for what reason?
The assessment of property is done so we can establish a base on which taxes are applied, tax levies are applied, and these tax levies go to a multitude of services that are provided. The main one in Phelps County and most counties is taxes that support school systems.
Right, yeah. There's sometimes a misconception about the assessed value that people see when they go to the website, and they think it means it's their kind of appraised value, and explain how that's different.
So in Missouri, we are tasked with assigning a true market value to property. Oftentimes, the appraisal process we use is mass appraisal, and we come in undervalue to what a bank appraisal would be or what an appraisal from a certified appraiser would be.
Right.
It's more specific, more detailed than mass appraisal would be. So we appraise a residential property, and then for assessment purposes, all residential properties are assessed at 19% of that value. So if you have a property, for example, that would be worth $200,000, when you see that assessed value, it will show up on your paperwork at $38,000, 19% of that $200,000.
Okay, got it. Okay, so can you explain the importance of property assessments for homeowners and the local economy?
Talked about this just briefly, but the total assessed value from every property in the county, and that would be residential property, commercial property or agricultural property, and also your personal property. Those values are the base from which levies are set and ultimately tax bills are generated. And then there's multiple overlapping taxing districts in Phelps County, depending on whether you're inside of city limits, outside of city limits, whether you're in the St. James Ambulance District or whether you're in the Rolla Ambulance District or whether you're in different school districts. And those all overlap, including fire districts. You might be in the Rolla Rural Fire District, you might be in the Doolittle Fire District. So there's multiple overlapping taxing districts. And then each one of those set their own levy, and depending on what district you live in, that sets your tax rate.
Okay, gotcha. And Rolla's tax rate was 19%?
The assessment rate is 19%, but then the tax levy rate that's applied to determine your taxes are determined by all of those taxing districts. Gotcha. It gets a little confusing.
Yeah. So how often are the property assessments updated, and what factors create a reassessment?
So by state law, full reassessment occurs in every odd year, meaning that adjustments due to market conditions can only be made in the odd year. If you build something new, if we are on a property doing an evaluation and we find a building that might have been built 8 or 10 years ago, but we never knew about it, we can add those in the even year or the odd year. But any across-the-board reassessment would have to be done in the odd year.
Okay. And then I know you're pulling information or maybe you're not, but you're getting information from the permit office that maybe that they've done an addition or something like that.
Correct.
That helps you with the assessment.
Inside the city of Rolla,
Okay.
if you have any project you're doing, you have to get a building permit,
Right.
and we are provided those building permits, so we know if projects are being done in Rolla. Other ways that we find out about new structures in the county is if someone's building a new home out in the county and they request an address. The person who does the addressing for the county resides in our office, so we know about those new addresses, and we always ask, what are you doing? And normally someone's building a new home.
Right.
Sometimes they just want an address on a farm property in case of emergency, even if no one lives
That makes
there.
sense.
And then the other thing we do, and this helps us greatly, is every 2 years we pay for fixed wing photography to be flown over the county, and then they have digital systems that will actually put a square around properties or individual buildings on properties if they have changed. So we can see if you added, a side stall on your barn, or we can see if you put an addition on your house, it will mark that and outline us for us, so we can say, hey, we need to go look at that property and see what happened.
Yeah, and this is an actual plane.
Yes, an airplane flies over and does fixed wing photography. I believe we do 4-inch resolution, which means we can get accurate down to 4 inches.
Okay, gotcha.
That also helps us. A lot of times we can do assessments just using our fixed wing photography. We do get oblique views. So if we have a building that's out in the open, if it's not covered by trees, and we normally fly in very early spring, so there's no leaf cover, but still sometimes in a heavy woods we can't see.
Right.
But at minimum it alerts us that there's something going on and we need to take a look at it and see what's happening.
Yeah, and then when that happens, if somebody goes out, a field agent.
Correct.
Okay.
We have 2 full-time field agents in our office right now. We're getting ready to hire a third to try and get some more old permits cleared and some extra work done in this 2024-2025 cycle. But they are highly trained, experienced field agents. They will come out onto your property. We always knock on the door. We hope someone's home. If no one's home, we do leave a card letting you know that we've been there, and then we will look at the property from the outside only. We never go in any buildings, even outbuildings. We just don't do that. We don't think that that's the correct way to operate.
Yeah. So does the homeowner have any obligation to report, especially if they're outside the city limits and you're not aware with a building permit?
So it's very helpful. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, you're fine.
It's very helpful if they do let us know. And a lot of times people will come in and say, hey, I'm getting ready to build a barn, or I'm getting ready to add on to my house. And that is helpful because then we can mark it and we know that we will have an accurate assessment of that property at that time. But eventually we catch up to it.
Okay.
State law says that we could actually, if we find something that hasn't been reported, we can go back years and tax for prior years. We do not choose to do that. It doesn't say we're required to. It says we're allowed to. So we don't choose to do that. If there's a property that has a building on it that we missed, we consider that
Okay.
our
Kind of give them
error.
a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you discuss any recent changes or updates in property assessment laws or regulations that may impact our homeowners in our community?
So the most recent change that has occurred, I believe it was a law that was passed last year, states that if without any improvements, like if you haven't done any changes to your property, but the assessor or the assessor's office comes in and they raise your value more than 15% at any one time, you have the right to request an in-person visit and an interior inspection if you so choose.
Okay.
So that kind of protects the homeowner from feeling like they were surprised or had an undue or an overly unexpected increase in their assessment.
How often do homeowners come to you and say, I just saw that my property was reassessed and I'm...
It's pretty regular. I mean, like I said, we leave cards anytime we're at somebody's house, and we have field agents out every day that the weather cooperates.
Yeah.
But pretty often people come in, they want to know what their assessed value is, they want to know how we determined it, and we're always glad to welcome anybody to come in and take a look at the data that we have and how we collected it and how we determined their values.
Are there any tax relief programs or exemptions available for eligible property owners?
So the only one that we are aware of, and I believe it's the only one available, is there's a program from the state of Missouri called the Missouri Property Tax Credit.
Okay.
And that's available to low-income senior citizens or those who are 100% disabled and meet income requirements. And those individuals will still pay the local tax. So they would still pay county tax, but then they can take that tax receipt and use it for a credit on their Missouri state income tax.
Okay.
Even if they are such low income that they don't have to file Missouri state income tax, they can still file it and claim that credit and get money back from the state.
Oh, that's good to know.
So that is a good, that's a...
Do you have anybody implementing that? Is that something that the community knows about?
So anyone who uses a tax preparer, whether they pay someone to do it or whether they use the program provided by AARP, which is free, should be able to, access that. And it is a state program. We have a flyer that we hand out in our office that goes a step by step if you qualify or if you don't, and how to claim that property tax credit. But as far as our office is concerned, our assessment remains the same whether you get a refund from the state or not.
Right, that makes sense.
But we try to help any way we can.
Yeah, that's really nice. So how does the assessment process take into account factors like renovations, improvements, or changes? And we kind of touched on this a little bit, but if a homeowner is, especially outside the city limits, and they did not get a permit for any renovations or additions, how do you, if you don't know what's going on inside the home because you're doing a visual inspection, what does that mean for the accuracy of the assessment? So
oftentimes, the homeowner is home, and we will ask them questions, or they might tell us, yes, I remodeled inside, or if we know that the structure used to be a garage and now the garage door is closed in and there's a door and windows in there, we have a pretty good idea that they've renovated their garage. But all of those factors, the renovations, improvements, or changes in market condition, they can change the value. They won't necessarily. So if someone's renovating and they're just replacing their windows, or they're putting a new roof on their house, or their siding's old and they're putting new siding on, that's just considered maintenance.
Yeah.
Or their furnace goes out and they put a new furnace in. That's just regular maintenance on a house, unless at some point in time the house had gotten so dilapidated that we lowered the condition, and then someone comes in and maybe buys it and completely fixes it up, then we would raise the condition again. But we don't always change value with renovations. If somebody has an unfinished basement that's just blank concrete walls, and then they make it living space, of course that's going to add value to the home.
Right.
So there are lots of factors. Market conditions are followed on a multi-year basement. I'm sure as a realtor you know that market can be very volatile. It can go up over a series of months and then maybe jag back down, or maybe 1 year things go really low, like for example in 2009 when we had the housing correction, the bubble burst, values plummeted. We don't follow month by month or yearly trends. We follow multi-year trends. It would not be even feasible for us to say, oh, the market's up 12% this year, we're going to raise everybody 12%, and then next year, oh, it's down 8%, we're going to lower everybody 8%. So we follow multi-year trends. We went from 2014 to 2021 without doing a market correction. We did one in 2021 in the Rolla and St. James school districts, and and we're set to do another market adjustment, probably countywide, for the 2025 year.
Okay.
Which once again follows that odd year
Right.
plan where we can only do market adjustments in an odd year.
Right. Okay. So one of the things that a lot of misconception comes from the assessor site, the GIS maps particularly, is the property lines, especially with larger parcels, acreage outside the city limits. And people will look at that and say, oh, these are the property lines. Or the seller will say, no, the GIS map shows, this is my property line, it's right. It's not the same thing as a survey.
Correct.
Yeah. And can you talk about some of the implications if you are going by just the GIS map versus a survey?
So our county houses a map of the county, and we have every parcel in the county outlined. Those lines that we have in our system are not survey accurate, and they are by law only to be used for assessment purposes.
Right.
Sometimes, especially even with digital mapping, with the curvature of the earth and the fact that we have nearly 23,000 parcels in Phelps County.
How many?
Nearly 23,000
Wow.
parcels in Phelps County. By the time each one of those parcels is platted onto the map, there are adjustments that have to be
Sure.
made. And then there are also adjustments for roadways. A lot of times someone's deeded boundary will go closer to the center of the roadway. We always fall back from the roadway, give an easement through there of any county, state road, and that may make your property actually show as less taxable acres than the acreage you have. And there are also sometimes errors that are made where lines may be shifted a little bit. This is very common, especially in more extremely hilly areas, like down the hill into Newburgh.
That makes sense, yeah.
As those hills are very, very steep, and you look at those lines on the map, you're looking at it over the map, they may be skewed up or down and may not show an accurate line. The only way to have an accurate measurement of your property is to have a survey conducted and have those lines pegged and marked on the ground. There's just no other way to do it. And then as far as your acreage is concerned, that survey can determine your actual acreage on the ground, but also whatever your deed says is your acreage. And a lot of times if we have that information, we will show the assessed acreage on our information, and then we will also show the deeded acres. So, and it's sometimes the same, but it's not always.
Yeah, because I know, like our property, for instance, on the assessor site, it shows less acreage than what my survey says. Sure. And so as a homeowner, when you see that, you're like, wait a minute, I own more acreage than what you're showing.
And that's very common. And larger tracts are even more common. I mean, if somebody has a half an acre, we might say they have 0.43 acres.
Right.
If somebody has 500 acres, we might only show it as 479.
0.6,
Right. You know, it's so it is a little bit relative. If you see a huge discrepancy, alert us and let us know. We are constantly remapping areas in the county as we receive new recorded deeds or new recorded surveys and new information.
And people sometimes think if the pins are there usually somewhere that somebody can go out and locate the pins, and
it's absolutely possible to do that, especially inside city limits. So, you know, if you have an idea, or you and your neighbor get together and say, we think the line's right here, you could get a metal detector and start looking around in the corners. And sometimes people come in and get maps from us too, or they go to the city and get a plat map that shows the lines, and then you can use that as a kind of a guide. And with a metal detector, you can sometimes find your own pins, which...
So, are there any upcoming initiatives or projects within the county's assessor office that you are particularly excited about?
So, actually, yes, we have been in a multi-year process of converting all of our data into a new computer program, and the bulk of that is coming to a head and set to be completed for 2025.
Okay.
And it's going to be very helpful in our office. It's going to make the staff more efficient. It's going to make the assessing process more streamlined. And it has been several years in the making, getting all this data converted and checking every parcel to make sure that it's imported correctly from the old system into the new system, and making sure all our data is correct. And when we keep saying we're going live in 25 with our new system, and when we do that, it's going to really help our office become more efficient. We are a public entity. We do work for the people. We consider ourselves public servants. If anybody has any questions, please come by our office. Just say you'd like to talk to somebody. We're glad to sit down with you anytime, discuss any problems or questions you might have. And we're happy to be here and doing what we're doing, and we feel like we're a vital part of keeping Phelps County going.
You are. Thank you.